Well, hey there, and welcome to our third video in our series on youth ministry strategy. Up to now, we've been talking about how to build a youth ministry that has an intention and a purpose, an effective ministry that takes kids from non-Christian to growing Christian to equipped Christian, where they're ready to start meeting and reaching non-Christians again, and some kids who pop down into leadership level. We overviewed that, and I want to take a look again. Let's head over to our work table and give a quick overview of what we've covered so far. Okay, here is our ministry funnel, and here's what we've got going on here. We talked about outreach level. These are non-Christian students, okay? And these are kids that you're wanting to have come in to do outreach activities and draw them into your ministry. This dark line is the point at which they become a Christian. And now they are a growth level student. Okay? They are reached by your typical youth group meetings, your big group meetings, your small group discussions, so they can ask questions and voice their doubts and work through that stuff. Okay? We mentioned a couple things. This phase, one, it's usually where we start. You come into a church and that's typically what's there. Okay, the second thing is 18 months. It can usually take a year and a half of this before kids are ready to move down to the next level, which is ministry level. Okay, this is what we're going to start talking about today. Our goal is to create a ministry that reaches these three groups. Now, to do that, we actually start with our church kids, growth level. We build a ministry. Eventually, we get to ministry level, where we are equipping them to help reach outreach kids. Then, and only then, do we really focus on outreach. That's bringing in new students. If you do outreach here without the ministry level kids, new kids come in, they meet your group, and your growth level kids may not be at a place where they're ready to welcome people. Maybe they like their small youth group. Maybe they want to sit with their friends and they don't want to talk to that strange person who they don't know. These kids aren't really ready for it. So what you have is you have non-Christians come into the group, and then they kind of don't have a great experience. They leave. And those people are really hard to get back into the ministry. So we want to do the process. We want to create a cycle where we start and build our growth level kids into ministry level. Then we start doing an outreach. And every kid should be able to reach these three levels in their spiritual development. Okay, so now we're going to focus on ministry level. And what exactly is that? And to focus on ministry level, I'm actually going to show you an illustration. So let's head out to the back of my truck where I have a little illustration set up. Why we need to do ministry level stuff. And you can use this illustration to communicate with your kids as well. Okay, we've got a bucket of water and a sponge. So let's see what's going on with the sponge and bucket of water. Imagine that this is a youth group kid, okay? Dry sponge. They're a Christian, they just became a Christian, and they need to soak up some information. They need to know about their faith and know the basics of it. So we are going to invite them to youth group. And this water is youth group teaching, growth level. Okay, they soak up a little bit, and that's good. Hey, that was awesome. I learned about being forgiving. Hey, that's awesome. I heard that dating talk I've never heard before about how to have Christian relationships. Soaking up more. Hey, this is how to get along with my parents. Soaking up a little more. Hey, this is some more stories about like serving other people and doing stuff. And what you're noticing, the sponge is kind of full. Okay, I can stick it more in this water and it's not going to soak up anymore. It really needs to be squeezed out. So let's take a little walk, and I'm going to show you something I love to do, which is gardening. And right here, I've got a blueberry bush, okay? I'm going to take this sponge that's dripping with water, and I'm going to use that water where it's needed, which is my very dry blueberry bush. And now I've got a couple things going on. I've got a blueberry bush that benefited from having the sponge squeezed out. I've got a happy sponge that's happy because it squeezed out what it knew, and now it's ready to soak up some more. So we're going to come back in here, and hey, we're learning lessons about patience, and we're learning lessons about forgiving other people, and the sponge is full, and guess what? Now the sponge needs to be squeezed out. And I'll be a little more specific. Maybe those lessons it heard were about patience and forgiving people, so maybe they then go to Vacation Bible School. And hey, look at these little lettuce plants that really need the water, so they're getting squeezed out. Okay, that lettuce benefits and the sponge benefits from being squeezed out. This is the cycle we need to create in ministry. When we don't do this, here's what happens. You get this sponge that's soaking and soaking, and this is a youth group kid. And what happens if they're only ever challenged at growth level? Well, you've got a kid then who, it's a cliquey youth group typically. This student has never challenged to think beyond themselves or look beyond themselves. So you've got a youth group where it's not really easy to bring other people into. Okay, this kid is starting to get bored with their faith because they keep hearing the talk about patience and the talk about forgiving people and the talk about dating and the talk about good friendships and the talk about getting along with your parents. And this thing is soaking wet, but when it doesn't get squeezed out, it's not doing what it's called to do. This sponge is either a bored youth group kid, a cliquey inbred youth group kid, or a kid who stops coming to your youth group. So let's take a look at the level that we're talking about, which is ministry level. I'm going to set my sponge down. Probably need to use that on my truck, it looks like. And let's talk about this. 87% of youth ministries don't program beyond growth level. And so that means around 87% of youth groups are watching kids not take that next step where they're doing something with their faith. When you do that, you risk a few things. You risk a youth group that's not friendly to bring new people into. You also risk kids getting bored with church, and you big time, you risk losing your upperclassmen. And I know that's a thing in ministry. How do I keep my upperclassmen? Life is getting busier. Well, imagine this. Imagine you give them the training and a vision to do more with their faith. You start providing training for them to do more with their faith, to take their faith and put it into actions, not growth level. This is beyond that. And you give them opportunities to start serving or doing missions or evangelism, and you really fill them with those opportunities, and you set kids' hearts on fire. You make them want to be at youth group because they're involved in it. Let them help programming, let them run games, let them be in the worship team, let them greet out front and sit with new kids and build relationships with them. You get kids who are inspired and passionate about your youth group. You will not have to worry about retaining them. Okay, I've watched this happen. I've watched kids do things like choose youth group over football because football kept them too busy and they couldn't do some of our after-school ministry stuff, so they stopped football. I watched another student stop and drop marching band. Okay, they were really good at drums. They stopped. They started being more involved in ministry stuff, helping out in our junior high. That kid actually went to college and became a youth pastor. This matters, equipping and doing ministry level stuff. So let's swing back over to the table and let's define and go through what is ministry level programming. So here's the deal. We talked about our illustration about the sponge. Kids need to be squeezed out. Okay, so what exactly is ministry team? Okay, here's the thing. I can't do the teaching that these kids need to do in my regular youth group meeting, and this is probably a separate thing you're going to do. I literally would have my youth group meeting and I had ministry team on a different night or at a different time, and we talked about ministry skills. Okay, the reason we do that is because this is different teaching. This isn't about, hey, getting along with friends and how to be forgiving and God forgives you and this isn't like, presenting the gospel. These kids need to learn to present the gospel. So it's different teaching for them. It's usually a different meeting, and you can figure out what that looks like in your schedule, but there are kids who are going to want to do this. Okay? One question that's often asked is, how do you decide who's in the ministry team? And I find this, the nature of ministry training kind of vets itself. If you're sitting in a thing and you're talking about how to make your testimony or how to share your faith or how to teach a lesson, that's an extra meeting. It's not a game meeting. It's fun because that's where they're at, but it often vets itself, and you'll find the kids who show up to that are the ones who are supposed to show up to that. So some people will ask, have you ever turned people away from ministry team? I probably have not turned people away from ministry team because generally people don't want to be a part of it if that's not where they're at. Okay, so let's go back to this real quick. What kind of things does a ministry team do? Well, it's different teaching. So the kinds of things you can be teaching them, you can teaching them about how to write your testimony, how to share your faith story, how to share your faith, how to lead someone to Christ. What's a good 4 or 5 steps that explain the gospel to them? I'm gonna flip around. You can talk to these kids about how to write a lesson. What's it like to go sit with a person who walks into a youth group? How do you greet kids at the door? How do you take a youth group and say, you know what? I see that kid who's new, and rather than sit with my friends, I'm going to sit with that kid Or I'm going to grab a couple of my friends and sit with that kid. Or I'm going to grab that kid and bring him over to my friends. It's a mindset that this meeting is no longer my main feeding thing. This is where I do ministry, and that's what feeds me. That mindset, okay? You can, like I said, give them areas of ministry. Let them get involved in worship team. Let them start picking music. How do you pick music? How do you pick upbeat songs and medium songs and slower songs to create a funnel to bring people into a worship mindset? Running a youth group store. You can have these kids up front sharing their testimony. They can teach parts of their lesson. Get these kids deeply involved. And the teaching that you do is equipping them to do it. That's what's fun about this. This isn't just head stuff. You teach them a skill, then you give them a chance to do it. And that's awesome. Okay? I have even took my ministry team and said, I don't think you guys know what it's like to go to another youth group, because many of them were in my youth group since 6th grade and now they're in 10th grade. So I know where you've been for 5 years. Go to another youth group next week. I broke them up into pairs. I found youth groups in the area, and when they met, I gave them an assigned youth group, and I did not tell the youth pastor they were coming. I did not want them to have special treatment. I wanted them to walk in feeling like a new person. Okay. I wanted the youth ministry to treat them however they would, and then we came back to share about our experience, and that was epic. Some of them, actually, they all had good experiences, so hats off to the ministries in my area. Nobody felt like, hey, once I'm there, I was ignored. Some of them were large youth groups, and they had systems in place to greet people. Some of them were small youth groups, and everybody was like, whoa, there's a new person. I loved debriefing. And one little thing, I was not afraid to send my kids to another youth group. I know where my kids are involved in getting trained and they're doing their thing. I want it because I want them to know what it feels like to be scared in a parking lot, staring at that front door, waiting to go in, because that's what it's like to be a new person. The stories back from them were epic. Kids talked about, hey, this thing was really, really good, or hey, they did this kind of greeting, but it would have been more comfortable if somebody sat with me. Okay. Another one was like, hey, they welcomed me into this tiny group, and they did this thing at the end where they put a candle on the floor. They all laid around it and did candle prayer. Can we do that? And I'm like, well, our ministry is about 60 kids at the time, so we got to look at what that looks like. Maybe in our small group settings, we can do it. They came back with ideas, and they were so excited to make our group more welcoming, and that was a win. So ministry teams are trained and taught differently. Okay. You can teach them peer counseling. You can teach them how to confrontation and talking down confrontations between people. Okay, you can give them all kinds of skills and make these people function. And remember, our goal is we're unleashing this stuff in our ministry, because they're going to come right around and they're going to do this in our ministry for the new people coming in. These kids make this ministry amazing. You create this cycle. Okay, so they have different teaching. And the other thing is, you're going to need to provide some experiences for them. And I want you to see a progression here. Okay, when my group is starting, we can do cleanup and service projects. Hey, it's leaf raking day in the neighborhood, or it's cleanup at church day, or we're going to go help this old lady move. It's just moving stuff. We can move stuff. Almost anybody can move stuff. Okay. Maybe another level is, I'm working on a curriculum, it's mostly fun stuff, and I'm kind of engaging people. But I don't have to share my faith. I'm not really ministering deeply. I'm having fun with them. VBS is a great place to do that. Kids ministry is a great place to do that. Kids clubs during mission trips are a great place to do that. And as they're progressing, maybe now we're doing more direct ministry. This might be, hey, we're going to go visit that nursing home down the street, and I just want you to sit and talk and listen to people. Okay, that's a little higher risk. There might be some skills I want to teach them, okay, but this is a good level. And then straight up evangelism, this is where, hey, we're going to go in and you're going to be equipped to share your faith. Maybe we do this on a mission trip where some kids share their faith at a church. Maybe we do, forbid me for saying, street evangelism, opportunities for them to share their faith, okay? Now, missions works into this, and there's even a progression in missions. Maybe a light missions trip is like inner city service, same language, similar culture. Maybe we go down to Appalachia and we're doing, Appalachian Missions Project, same language, kind of, and a different culture, much slower pace of living. Maybe then we're doing ministry down in Florida where we're doing different culture. Maybe it's migrants coming in and we're doing some migrant camps. So it's different culture, but we're still in our country. Okay? Maybe the next progression is we're going overseas, but they speak English. And then the hardest one, of course, is we're going to another country and it's a different language and it's a different culture, and hold on tight. Okay? Create a progression that you work your kids through, whether it's your local programming or whether it's your missions project. If you've got that progression, you move kids to a deeper place in their faith and they're looking forward to the next step, which is awesome. Okay, let's take a little recap here. Ministry level training, okay? A couple things. We do it because our ministry needs those kids here to be able to reach the new kids coming into our ministry. Without them, new kids come into an immature ministry with kids who are typically not ready to greet them, and they don't stick. Okay, we also need this because after 3 or 4 years of this, they need something more. So give them something more. Okay, that helps your retention for upperclassmen. It helps kids be passionate about what's going on. Okay, once they're equipped, this cycle starts and every kid should be able to move through this level. Okay, a couple things about it again. Okay, picture the sponge thing. I would show that illustration to my kids and say, this is you. Okay, ministry team, this is probably a separate meeting you're going to do. This could be a separate Sunday school class. This could be before youth group. It could be on a different night entirely. Your teaching is different, okay? Your teaching is going to be more about skills they need rather than just gospel, forgiveness, and patience. This is going to be about how to share your faith, how to write your testimony, how to do peer counseling. You're going to teach them skills here, okay? And then you're providing opportunities in a progression that grows them, okay? A couple last minute things, and this is just off the top of my head. Some of the coolest things I've seen in ministry are when kids take charge. Okay, I told my seniors, and many of you do this, a senior night at youth group. We plan this far in advance, and I say, okay, y'all, you're in charge. You plan the games, you pick the worship, you lead worship, you guys teach the lesson. Set the kids loose. The lesson that was taught that night was one of the most dynamic lessons I have ever heard from a student. Okay, this girl got up there and she talked about a sleepover that she went to. And that sleepover, she said, we all were so excited as we're getting there. We're like, hey, we're going to stay up all night. And she said, you ever try that? And then a couple people fall asleep over in the corner. And you're like, yeah, but we said we're going to stay up all night. We're going to do it. We're going to stay up all night. Okay, and then a couple people more fall asleep. And she said, pretty soon it feels like I'm the only one awake at this sleepover trying to stay awake, guys, stay awake. We said we were going to do all these amazing things. She said, that's what my youth group feels like now. She said, I feel like my youth group is falling asleep when we've said we're going to do great things. This senior let that message out and you could hear a pin drop. She could say that. I could say that and they would hear it, but it's not really the same. But to hear their peer who they look up to come and drop that on them, it was epic. Okay. Another example of ministry training. So my 9th graders, I'm going to show you our progression of how kids can be involved in ministry. I generally keep kids three years above the people they're ministering to. So my 9th and 10th graders can work with 4th and 5th grade, and we have a pre-youth group. Okay, my 11th and 12th graders can work with middle school, the younger grades, 6, 7. Okay, then out of high school, 2 years out of college, you can work with any group in high school. So I've got opportunities for kids to do this stuff, and they stay around for it. One ministry we created was our 4th and 5th grade outreach nights once a month, and we called it Play People. Okay, there was something some children at missions when we were doing inner city mission in Chicago, they called us Play People because we came and played with them. We liked the name, so we kept it. These 9th graders and 10th graders would meet in my office on the first Tuesday of the month, and they would brainstorm and plan a really crazy game and the rest of the details of a youth group night. The second week, they would put a list together and they put out mailings to every kid on our 4th and 5th grade mailing list, and there were like 100 of them. They made a newsletter with the event and sent it to every kid. The third week, they called every kid on the list. Did you get my letter? Hi, this is Nikki. Hey, this is Josh from youth group, and we're calling to see if you're coming to our Play People event. Okay, the 4th week, they did the event, and the event was formatted like youth group. Kids came in. There was a wild, crazy game. And I'm talking about like the whole church, lights are off, black lights, there's fog, and kids are running around with nylons over their faces being these hose head monsters and this crazy, like, escape the monsters and score points for your team's game. It was insane. And those kids also led worship, and those kids also did the lesson. And then the next week, we start all over again. That ministry was amazing. In our 4th and 5th grade, we saw in our very first one, 67 kids came to that event. So if I'm building a monthly activity and my 5th graders are a class of 30, guess what's going to happen next year? I'm going to gain 30 insanely involved kids in my junior high ministry, and it feeds every year this monster class of incoming 6th graders. You will build your ministry insanely if you do that pre-youth group, 4th and 5th grade stuff. But anyway, so ministry training and equipping. Go ahead and get that involved. Assess, is that the place that I'm at? And the way you'll know is kids want to start getting involved that are growth level. Typically it's 18 months. And like I said, this is a game changer in your ministry. You unleash kids, you won't have to worry about retention. Your ministry is going to be epic because those kids are involved in doing stuff. And you're going to see your retention, even new people coming in, those kids will be greeting them, and you create a ministry discipling machine out of your ministry. Okay? Ministry level, that's the one we're covering. So our next talk is going to be outreach level. Once your ministry kids are equipped, it's time to start kicking into major outreach mode. And we'll talk about what that looks like. So see you in video 4.